Let me give you a little bit of context. I'm out in the country today to let you know a little bit more about the textual concept of context. Now, context has to do with where the author comes from and where the reader comes from. And context kind of blends with what's been written to create meaning. So I'm from the coast, I'm not actually from the country, and I see a brown stick over here on the ground and I think, oh, that's an odd looking brown stick. I go to pick it up and hey, I was a little bit misguided. It's not a brown stick, it's a brown snake. And that whole context of where I've come from has made a very surprising event to unfold. We're out here celebrating a birthday party and it's a bike race day. Where we're from, we don't have motorbikes and my family doesn't have motorbikes, but we're watching everybody else race and have a great time. And in this context, for some people that have that background, they understand what's going on, they know how to operate and what to do. But for me and my family, we sort of sit back and we've got a different context. When we're here at the same location, we're doing different things because we come from different backgrounds. So even in this same country, the way I see one situation is actually going to be different to the way the next person sees a situation. We could be talking about the exact same thing, but because of context, we're going to be having two different perspectives and interpretations of what we're talking about. Now in English, this means the way I read a text is going to be different to the way you read a text. And the way you read a text, it's going to be different to the way the next person reads a text. It's because of the backgrounds that we have. They're all different and they're varied. And that's going to have an impact on the way we interpret the meaning. Each meaning is going to be slightly different. Now for your 5 or 6 year old child, a good understanding for them to have at the end of the year is that different texts need different types of language. And at different texts, they're going to reflect different aspects of their life, and they're going to be composed for different purposes based on the audience. When they're 6 or 7, they're going to be wanting to understand that different cultures communicate through different texts for different reasons, whether it's through a book or a magazine or a newspaper or even on the internet with services like YouTube or Facebook. Now when they're 7 or 8 or even 9, kids are going to begin to recognise that based on your purpose of writing, it's going to have a different type of structure, and there's going to be special language features that are going to be in that type of writing, and that people reading their text are going to view it differently based on maybe where they come from or what they've done or maybe the culture that they've lived in. It's not going to be solely on the person that's written the text, it's also on the person that's reading the text. Now when their kids are 11 or 12, they're going to realise that based on their context, they're going to need specific language, and that because of their own context, they're going to respond to text completely differently to the way somebody else would. Kids in this age group will start to explore culture and understand that it's made up of beliefs, values, way of living, customs, and language. Important for them to recognise that context isn't just about the author, it's also about the person who's reading the text, and how the author and the reader work together to create a new piece of information. When they're 12, 13 or 14, they're going to realise that context changes with culture, time and technology. And they'll start to notice that different cultures from different times had different types of modes of medium. They may have been more interested in reading a newspaper because YouTube wasn't available. And that when a text was created, it was created under the influence of other texts that were made in that culture. And in this time, they're also starting to see that each culture has subcultures as well. So you might have the Australian has a culture here, but obviously I'm from the coast and I enjoy the coastal kind of lifestyle of surfing and the beach, but out here people, they're more into the farming and the motorbikes, highlighting two different types of subcultures within the Australian culture. When they're 14, 15 or 16, they're really starting to understand that culture's pretty big. It's not just that we look different or we feel different, but we actually think completely differently. And this is really going to take a big impact on the way you create a text. Somebody written a text in China and you may have it translated into English, you're really not going to understand what they mean because you're not looking through the eyes of that person. So you're not really going to understand what was going on in their head at the time of that writing that text. And they're going to see that the way they understand text is really filtered through like glasses that they can't take off. They can't take them off their head because they're going to see the world through it. Even the world that's been presented to them through a book, they're going to read it through their own context glasses that they've got on their head. Now when they're 16, 17 or 18, they're going to really start to appreciate this context thing and this intercultural thing, and the more reading that they do from other cultures and other texts, it'll broaden and extend their ability to make meaning from what it is that's in front of them. And they'll really start to understand that it's a truly dynamic relationship between the author and the reader of the text, this idea of context. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you've learned a lot about context today. Hope it's given you some context from the context of the country. I'll see you next time.